Disney's stories dealing with friendship is not particularly groundbreaking. What is innovative and compelling, however, are the nuances with which Amphibia views its central friendship between Anne, Marcy, and Sasha. There is no saccharine sentimentality here. These three deeply care about each other, and they want the best for each other, and they love spending time with each other. But there are a lot of difficulties in that friendship that cause tension that the show does not ignore or gloss over. These are real fissures in the bonds between them that cannot be solved with a little hand-holding and a few nice words. And I really appreciate that. It reinvigorates the whole friendship idea from something kind of cheap and abstract to something real and visceral. Of course, there is a reason why stories about friendship intended at a younger audience have become so cliché. Friendship is extremely important for everyone, but especially for younger people, kids who have not yet experienced romantic relationships. Friendships are the most important relationships in their lives, outside perhaps their relationships with their parents or siblings. And it is absolutely true that the importance of friendships does not fade with time necessarily, even as one develops romantic relationships. A lot of my favorite works deal with these long, enduring friendships between adults who've built the bonds between them over a long period of time. It has been constantly said ever since the time of the Greeks that friendships are more reliable and more longer lasting and more consistent than romantic relationships, for the most part. And there's a reason for this. There's logic behind it. Romantic relationships are, to a certain extent, based on infatuation and attraction, and that can fade. Whereas the best kind of friendships that are based in a mutual understanding and a mutual enjoyment of each other's company, that is a lot more substantial and a lot less vulnerable to the vicissitudes of the world. Now, that's not to say friendships can't fade or break apart over time. They absolutely can. But they are more able to endure the changing tides of life and all its transiences than relationships that are based in infatuation and attraction. Eros. Aristotle and Cicero both have very astute and precise depictions of what the best kind of friendships are like and the value they can provide to those who participate in them. And I do believe that increasingly in the first decades of the 21st century, we have perhaps an even stronger understanding and care for friendships than did generations before. Romantic relationships, of course, are not going away, and they're still very important. But it is true that these days there is a lot more pessimism and a lot more cynicism about romantic relationships than you would see a couple generations ago. A lot fewer people are in these relationships than there were in the past. There's statistical data to back that up. And this is particularly felt clearly in the younger generations. According to a 2018 article from The Atlantic, about 60% of adults under the age of 35 live without a spouse or romantic partner. That is significantly higher than in our parents' and grandparents' generations. In this context, friendships, strong, lasting, firm friendships, are more important and more necessary than before. So it is good to see media focusing on these friendships, both in shows directed at younger audiences and in shows directed more at adults. These are strong, compelling bonds worth depicting. So, friendship itself is not the problem. The difference is, of course, between friendship as a real, tangible bond between two people, or between more than two people, and the abstract, saccharine, sentimentalized idea of friendship that has really become a defining ethos in a lot of cartoons and other works directed at a younger audience. These works can be rather platitudinous. There's a lot of simplistic bromides about how friendship can conquer all if you trust in it, and, well, no, it can't. I do not need any shows, but especially those that are trying to be appropriate for children, to be very hard-nosed and cynical, but I do want them to depict life in its truth, in its wild, unpredictable, exciting essence, instead of being so rigid, so moralistic, and so platitudinous. These simplistic depictions of friendships are bad for the same reason that simplistic depictions of romantic relationships are bad. They're bad for the same reason people disdain all those asinine romantic comedies where the couple is obviously destined for each other, and there is no serious doubt that they are going to get together, even despite the minor obstacles they might face throughout the course of the work. Now, there is not necessarily anything wrong with depicting simple, pure, uncomplicated friendships or romantic relationships. It's not my cup of tea, per se, but it is not innately bad. The problem comes when that is all you depict, and the work starts to feel false and plasticky and mechanical. Amphibia I greatly respect because it is able to avoid this trap. Yes, there is that wholesome, simplistic, straightforward friendship between Anne and Sprig, wherein they get off to a little bit of a rocky start in the first couple episodes, but once they overcome that initial rough patch and they really get to know each other, there are no serious and earnestly felt problems that disrupt the unity and the continuity of that friendship. The friendship is going to stay intact. No one seriously doubts that. The friendship between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy, however, is more interesting because it's more fraught and more tense. There are a lot of different layers to unpack here. Making the friendship between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy completely wholesome and beneficial to the three of them would have been an easy choice. Perhaps they could have had a few more hiccups in that relationship than Anne and Sprig did. Perhaps they would have a few more issues to work through, but nothing that could not be resolved through a few chats, a few platitudes about how important their bond is, and then everyone moves on. It also would have been easy to make at least one of the trio, or perhaps both Sasha and Marcy, so-called bad friends that Anne needs to cut loose in order to move forward with her life. It would have been easy to make them cruel, callous, hard-hearted people who do not care about her at all and are just using her for their own advantage. But the show thankfully stays away from such reductionist narratives. Even in the case of Sasha in Season 1, which is probably the most negatively any member of the trio has been portrayed, she's still not a horrible person. She's manipulative, sure, but she cares deeply for Anne. She wants to get Anne home. She wants Anne to be taken care of. Yes, she does enjoy a bit of luxury, a bit of glamour in Toad Tower, but it's hard to blame her after the conditions she endured back when she was first captured and thrown in a prison cell. And also, these pleasures are transient. They don't really satisfy her. She's not a hedonist. What she wants above all is to help out her friend and get Anne back to Earth. She cares about Anne and Marcy at least as much as she cares about herself. The problem is that she does not really take into account what Anne wants for herself, and so she's shocked and dismayed when Anne does not consider her a good friend and rejects the friendship between them at the end of Season 1, causing a bout of existential malaise that dogs Sasha throughout the entirety of Season 2 until she commits herself more fully to Anne's side and to Anne personally in Season 3. Scenarios like this are typical to the approach Amphibia takes in its depiction of the relationships between the three girls. They are not bad people. They deeply care about each other, and yet they find themselves having grown apart. Secrets have developed in each of their hearts that they don't tell each other, and they don't know each other as well as they once did when they were kids. Marcy hides information from Anne and Sasha about how she was responsible for them going to Amphibia, but she is not the only one at fault there. Perhaps she would have been more open had Anne and Sasha been more willing to listen to her own desires and convictions, had they been more interested in what she actually wants for herself. The bonds between them are not simplistic. They are not easily definable into moral binaries. And this is what keeps me coming back to the show, and it's why I find it compelling, much more so than the grand battle for the fate of the world against our little blue lizard dictator there. Their friendship in childhood was slightly troubled, but still breezy and lighthearted, and the problems were small enough that they could afford to ignore them, but now they're all growing up. They're all developing their own wants, and their own desires, and their own senses of conviction. And the bond between them is tested by the different directions they're taking in life, and they need to really dig into the problems with that friendship so they can try and fix it and make it stronger in the future, and I hope that they will be able to, and I find it quite a compelling series of bonds to watch play out over the course of multiple episodes of Amphibia. Can't wait to see what the show does. They have to struggle to fix that friendship. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this before anyone else. What do y'all think is going to happen to the friendship between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy? I'm interested to know. Sound off in the comments. Anyway, thank y'all for watching. Adios, comrades.